louder, and welcome to Stories of Amazing Grace. We're coming to you from Bixter Chapel at the Madison Church of Christ in Madison, Tennessee. And we invite you to join us on the first Wednesday of each month right here in Madison, Bixter Chapel, Madison Church of Christ in beautiful Metro Nashville, Tennessee. Our theme scripture comes from Romans 8, 38 through 39. I'm sure that nothing can separate us from God's love. Not life or death, not angels or spirits, not the present or the future, and not powers above or powers below. Nothing in all creation can separate us from God's love for us in Christ Jesus our Lord. What would your reaction be if you had a dream that said, buy a farm, grow food, and give it away? Many of us would blame the spicy food we had for lunch. But Lori Birckhead had such a dream. Laura says, even when we waver, God doesn't. Tonight's story of Amazing Grace is about letting go of control, walking by faith, and learning that God's provision always arrives, though rarely in the way we expect. So watch this video, and then you'll meet Lori Birckhead.
I got involved with By Faith Farm because of my job with Society of St. Andrew. We are a hunger relief, food waste awareness national nonprofit, and I'm the program coordinator for Tennessee. So I cover the entire state. The whole premise of my job is to work with farmers and growers across the state. Before they turn their fields over, I will go out with volunteers and we'll glean the fields. And then we donate it to local feeding agencies. And obviously, By Faith Farm is a perfect place for me to be at because they donate all of their food. This is the berry patch. I have my trusty tool with me. And I'm just going to be in here plugging along, getting all the weeds out.
By Faith Farm is a community of people giving back to the community, and that's what we do.
Please welcome Lori Birckhead. Come on up. Have a seat. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Sure. Well, let's start with this dream. I've had dreams. I've had reoccurring dreams. My reoccurring dream is always I'm missing one course in high school, which is math, and I can't graduate unless I take that math course. Over and over I've had that dream. But tell me about your dream.
Well, this was a really unusual dream, unusual than any dream I'd ever had. And at that time, I was working with my husband, Jim, in his dental office. I wasn't the type to grow flowers or had a lot of plants around them. I couldn't even grow I always said, I can't even grow a green plant. But this particular night, I had a dream, and it was like someone had a video camera, and they were just spanning this property, and it was beautiful. I saw ponds and pastures and trees, and at the end of this vision, just the words, a voice that said, buy land, grow food, and give it away, just like that. And it was so unusual that I woke up and I was like, wow, that is the craziest dream I've ever had. And I actually rolled over and woke my husband up. And I said, Jim, I had the craziest dream. And it said, buy land, grow food, and give it away. And he rolled over, knowing that he had to get up in a couple of hours to go to work, and said, go back to sleep. And so I did. But the more unusual thing was that the dream kept coming back. And even right away, I thought, well, first I thought, you have the wrong number. I am not a farmer. I cannot do that. After really kind of thinking about it, I thought, well, maybe this is the Lord, and he's saying, feed my people. And so the easiest thing to do is to donate money. And Jim and I had talked about it. We were already donating to some food charities, but we started doing that even more intentionally. Well, the dream came back, and Jim, having worked on a farm as a kid, hauling hay, he knew how hard it was, and he kept saying, Lori, that is not a dream, it's a nightmare, and we cannot do that. So he had the idea, maybe the Lord wants us to do something more hands-on, and we started working with Room in the Inn, which maybe you'll have that here as well, that you're making meals and sitting down with homeless people, and it was a beautiful experience, and we both enjoyed. But after that, the dream came back again. By then, my heart started to change. It was like the Lord kept putting me in front of agriculture where I would never be before, where things would pop up in strange places. And so I started to feel like, okay, I can't, but he can. But still, my husband, being the logical person, was like, it's just not possible. So we were getting ready to go to a conference, and because I do the accounting, I was really backed up, had a lot to do, and I had another dream. And this time, there was no visual. I didn't see anything. It was just a voice, and the voice said, put your house on the market now. And it was that same kind of emphatic voice, you know? So when I woke up, I was like, no, I can't do that. Too much to do. Your house, you know, if you're going to put your house on the market, it has to be clean. And my house was a pigsty, and I didn't have a lot of time left. But I don't know how to explain it, but it just seemed so like someone was pressing on my back, you know? And I thought, okay, I'll try. And I started cleaning the house and then asked someone to come over and help me. And Jim was late coming home, which was good because she had hauled off a carload of stuff, and we cleaned garage and closets and everything. And when Jim walked in, he said, you and what army has been cleaning this house? And I'm still not sure about approaching my husband with the thought of selling our house. And I ran upstairs to do the accounting, and Jim hollers upstairs, I know what you're doing. And I was like, what? And he said, you're going to sell this house. And I came downstairs kind of laughing, thinking, what gave it away? You know, all the tools in the garage are organized and the clothes in his closet. And he said, because you put the bread in the pantry and you never put the bread. So we laughed, and that was in 2010. And in 2010, I don't know if anyone remembers, or you remember, Larry, but the real estate market was totally dead. There was really nothing happening. And the house across the street from ours had been on the market for almost 2 years. And so Jim said, you know what, okay, if this house sells, that'll be God saying, go to the farm. And we left, and we went on our little trip. And when we came back, and we had our friend go ahead and list the house. And when we got back, it was not just 2010, it was May of 2010, when maybe you might remember, but the 100-year flood happened. And we got a call from the real estate agent, and she said, I hope you're sitting down. We got a contract on your house with no contingencies. And that's when Jim said he kind of got chills and said, okay, I guess we got to fund that farm. And that's kind of how it started.
Wow.
Yeah.
But Jim wasn't on board from the get-go.
No.
And you weren't either, I guess, were you?
No, really, I wasn't. I mean, I would like to say that I had a dream and I knew it was the Lord, and I said, yes, Lord, and we ran out and bought a farm like right off the bat, but I didn't. I questioned it, And I was afraid, I let maybe my fear kind of step into, and I felt like I can't, it's just not possible. And Jim the same, that it didn't seem like something we could do. So we finally realized with everything in life, we can't, but he can.
Have you had dreams before like this or since?
No, nothing like this dream. Now, yes, I have, and even as a child, I had some dreams that later sort of happened, but really nothing to this extent that seemed like like a prophetic dream or an order,
Did you tell it to anyone else other than your husband? And what was their reaction?
Oh, everyone thought I was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everyone was, yeah. But that's sort of how it started, and actually even more amazing, but when we started looking for farms, we got serious about it. Whenever Jim had time on the weekends or after work, we had a real estate agent showing us farms. And I don't know what I was expecting, but I guess I thought when we drove onto the property, I don't know if I thought I'd hear violins or what or something, and God would let me know this was it. But nothing seemed right. And also, Jim, being the logical man he is, when he first realized, okay, we really need to do this, but he had his certain criteria, and he said, okay, if we're going to do this, then it cannot be more than 15 acres. It cannot be more than X amount of money. It cannot be more than 30 minutes from my office. And I'm like, okay, I can work with that, and I'm sure God can too, And then as we were looking at things, nothing quite seemed right. And so we were with the real estate agent one day, and she said she knew, my husband a little bit, and was trying to show things within his criteria. But this particular day, she said, listen, we're going to go right past another farm that's for sale, but it's nothing like on Jim's list. And she goes, would you want to look at that? And Jim said, okay. And so we drove onto the farm, which is now By Faith Farm. And as we drove on, we drove to the kind of like the north pasture. And Jim just looked at me and he said, I think we need to put an offer on it. And I was like, did you see the listing agreement? It's 97 acres. It's like 4 times the amount of money you said we could spend, and it's almost an hour from your office. And so I really felt like that day it was the Holy Spirit that just said, this is it, whispered in his ear. And because that wasn't a logical thing either, But that did end up being the farm.
And you had no experience in farming?
Not a thing. Like I said, I couldn't even grow a green plant. And so even then it was like, okay, Lord, what's next? How do we do this?
How did you learn how to manage a farm?
Well, a lot of things. I just like driving onto the farm, I saw all this pretty kind of golden looking stuff sort of growing in the field. And I thought, isn't that so pretty? And it turned out to be sagebrush, which means, the soil is pretty dead. And so one thing I had done, and what I believe God did to prepare me, is as he started to change my heart, I was thinking, well, if we're going to give away food, I want it to be what I would want to eat. And whenever we can afford it, I buy organically grown. And so, just make it a little harder. Let's grow it organically, But I Googled that one day, how to grow organic food or something like that. And this picture pops up, and it's a guy called the Barefoot Farmer. And he has long dreadlocks in his beard. And I was like, okay, obviously he looks like a farmer. But he happened to be having like a fall solstice or kind of a farming convention at his farm that very next day. And it just happened to be up the road from my husband's office. I thought, would you want to go to this, Jim? And Jim said yes, which is surprising because Jim rarely tells me yes right off the bat, Usually I think about it a while, but we went to that, and the one thing it showed me is that I saw people that look like hippies and people that look like they just stepped out of Belle Meade. You know, it was all kinds of people. And I met young people that had agriculture degrees. And I think God was helping me to see that my image of a farmer could be anybody. And I think also he's showing me that, you know, he chooses the unlikely maybe, you know. But anyway, I felt a little more confident about thinking, well, if they all can be farmers, maybe I can too. But that guy that I met that day, he also did some consulting. So when we finally found the farm, I thought, how do we even know if this is a good farm? How do you know if this is good croppable land or whatever? So I did contact Jeff Poppin, the Barefoot Farmer, and he came out to consult with us. And so for that very first garden, I just took copious notes. He was there for several weeks, and not there every day, but a few times a week. And he was there, and we tried to get in that first garden. And then after that, we couldn't afford to keep him all the time. It was actually quite expensive to have him as a consultant. And then it was, after that, just on your own and trying to recreate, you know, what we had done that year.
Who gets the food? How do you distribute the food?
Well, in the beginning, Jim would put it in the back of a truck and go to different area food banks. And the farm is in Joelton, which is still Davidson County. And there's a place called the Master's Table up in Springfield that prepares meals for homeless folks. And he would drive it to the Master's Table or to the Joelton Hope Center or into Nashville to the Rescue Mission. But a lot of times, you know, those are all nonprofits too, and they didn't always have somebody there. He'd drive in, and maybe they went home early, or their food bank was full, or they didn't need tomatoes today, or whatever. And so we found that the growing of the food was challenging, but the distribution was sometimes even as much so.
That's the biggest challenge, is distribution?
It ended up being. You know, and we were growing more and more as the years went by. So we connected with Second Harvest of Middle Tennessee, and they're, if you know about Second Harvest, they're a huge warehouse of food for all of Tennessee, really. And they could come out, bring out a box truck with a lift, and as you saw there, sometimes when we would grow corn, we might have 8,000 pounds of corn, and they would pick it up with like a tow motor thing, and then distribute it for us. And now, any of the Second Harvest partners can come to the farm and pick it up directly. My understanding is when they go into Second Harvest, there is a little bit of a fee when they go there. When they come to our farm, there's no fee. They just come, pick it up, and yeah.
Tell me about the sweet corn. You had some failed harvest with that, or what?
Well, sweet corn, we were pretty successful at for a couple of years in a row, and I was sort of beginning to feel like, I've got this, you know, I've got this. And so this particular year, we put the sweet corn in, planted it, and then the rains came almost immediately. And the corn grew, but the weeds grew faster. And after the rain stopped, I was out there. The temperatures went up too. It was in the high 90s, and I was weeding. This is before we really had any volunteers. So I was weeding this corn and just not in a very good mood, you know. And this gentleman came up, Ralph McDonald, and Ralph's wife's family had owned that property before we did. And so Ralph would often stop by, and he thought it was ridiculous that I was a farmer anyway. And he would come by mostly to make fun of me, you know. Mm-hmm. And it was funny. I would laugh with him. But this particular day, I was not really in the mood for jokes. And Ralph came by, and he was like, "Lori, what are you doing?" I was like, "I'm weeding the corn, Ralph." He said, "Why are you doing that?" I said, "Because the weeds are as tall as the corn." And he said, "Lori, don't you see that little tassel on top of the corn stalk?" He said, "It's run its whole life cycle, and I don't care how long you weed it, you're never getting an ear of corn." And that was after 2 days of about 8 hours a day weeding this corn. And so Ralph left. I went into the barn, and I didn't just cry, I sobbed. And I yelled at God, you know, why am I doing this? I obviously don't know what I'm doing. And anyway, I cried for a while, and then I kind of got over my pity party and went about doing my other chores. And then the next day, I got a phone call from a lady who wanted to come and visit the farm. And I said, sure. And she said, I just want to tell you that a year ago, there was a little article written about your farm. And I knew about the article. It was beautiful, and they talked more about not so much what we were growing, but about God and about how he speaks to all of us. And, you know, just listening for his voice. And anyway, it was a beautifully written article. And she told me that a year ago, her and her husband read that article. And every day since then, they had gotten up, they prayed together, and they reread the article because it gave them the courage to step out and do something that they felt God calling them to do. That was also out of character, and they didn't feel equipped to do it. So anyway, after that phone call, I thought, oh, now I get it. It's not just about the corn crop or not just about growing food. It's about you. It's about telling your story. I was talking to God, you know, it wasn't like I had a dream or anything, but it was like a revelation of what he really wanted this to be about. And the food was just an opportunity to, you know, show love to people, but also to tell God's story.
And you have told the story. It's gone worldwide, hasn't it?
Well, that was another, I think, something that God set up. You know, I was at the Coleman tractor one day, and I met a young girl, and she asked if we gave farm tours, and I said sure. And anyway, she came back to the farm. She had a camera, and I sat down, and she asked me to tell the story of the farm, which I did. And then at the end, she said, well, I'm a bit of a storyteller. And so I figured I would never see the video, but she did put it on TikTok, and it got over 18 million views. Yeah. It's a 7-minute video.
And we used part of that video in the introduction.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. Amazing.
So the beautiful part of that, though, was we were contacted by people from all over the world, from the Fiji Islands, from Australia, South Africa, the UK, and it was their stories. You know, they would call and say, you know, that they were inspired, but also to tell me their God story of what God is leading them to do. So it was kind of like I could almost see like the whole world, you know, and every time someone would tell me their story, it was like another light and another light. And I thought, you know, that's really what it's all about, is just connecting the lights, you know, to be the light and connect light, because the light will dispel the darkness. And if we all just do what we can do, you know. Anyway, it was a beautiful experience, and it did, I guess, spread God's word even further.
What is an army worm?
That was one of the things that happened maybe midway. We've been doing this for 14 years, so our local ag extension agent, I'd heard that army worms were marching from Mississippi to Tennessee.
Really?
And I laughed about it. I really thought he was kidding, because I was out there weeding, and I was envisioning these little worms with hard hats on marching across the state. There's no way, you know. And then a couple of days later, a guy, Philip, who also leases some land on our property, and he raises hay and cattle. And I went back to the hay crop, 10 acres of hay that was about 3 to 4 foot tall. And one night was down to the dirt. And that particular year, we had worked really hard. We'd gotten a crop in late, but we had a lot of sweet potatoes, and it's a sweet potato story I can tell you. But The sweet potatoes were in the ground, and they were precious because they came, that was another God thing that had happened. And so I knew the armyworms were on the back of the property, and they were coming. There was evidence of them coming closer to our donation crop. And we started praying. We had young kids praying. I asked churches to pray. And because we don't use any chemicals or pesticides, there wasn't a lot I could do. There is a solution called BT, and it's approved for organic farms. So we did spray the BT, and all of my other traditional farmer friends said, that's not going to do it. You got to get the tough stuff out. And I was like, no, I can't use that. So we just prayed. And the armyworms stopped just short of our sweet potatoes.
Really?
So the crop was saved, and we got about 6,000 pounds of sweet potatoes that year. So it was pretty awesome.
Let's look at some photos here. We get a picture of a man eating a turnip. What's the story behind this?
Well, that was sweet. That was just a nice day because I had a truckload of turnips, and the organization was supposed to pick them up, couldn't. And so I put them in the back of the truck, and I drove to Loaves and Fishes. And as I was driving in, I saw they prepare meals, and people can come from all over East Tennessee and get a hot meal. And there were people walking in with canes and walkers, and people had children holding their hands, and I just saw them as they were coming in. I was driving in real slowly, and as I drove in, this gentleman was just eating those turnips right off the back of the truck. And I like raw turnips too. So I got out of the truck, and he just said, he goes, "You're my new best friend." And I said, "Can I take a picture?" So it was just a happy day because we grow the food, and it's fun. There's a lot of good things in just having your hands in the dirt. Now I love it. It's totally changed me. But I don't often get to see someone actually eating the food. So that was just I felt like it was a little God blessing that day.
We've got a picture of his second harvest truck. Who are all these people? Volunteers that came out to help with the farming? Or
Yeah, I think that particular day there were kids from, it's called Catholic Heart Work Camp, and they come from all over the United States, and they come to Nashville, stay in gymnasium, and they go out and just help around the city, and we're blessed to have those kids come to our farm.
Do people come out and pick and eat?
Oh, no. I made an agreement in the very beginning with God that if he would bless the farm, we would never sell the food. And so all the food is donated. Now, if volunteers come out, I like to give someone a gift as they leave. So if they leave with some squash or corn or whatever, a little bit.
So if I want to come out and eat some strawberries, I could go to the field and maybe get some for myself?
Oh, yeah, a little bit. Now, you can't take a couple of bushels, but I'll give you a little sampling.
This is your barn.
Yeah, that's our barn.
Nice looking barn.
I love the barn. And that was another thing that wasn't a dream, even later, that the barn would be the heart of the farm. And so when we built the barn, it was just a natural wood, and I thought it was so pretty, but I kept thinking of that dream that the barn would be the heart of the farm. I thought, we got to paint it red if it's a heart. So it's a red barn.
We're going to shot of the property, a girl and dad. It looks like a peaceful place.
Yeah, it's very peaceful.
A little fountain out there in the pond.
Mm-hmm.
And a picture of a bedroom here. Now, you rent out the barn, is that correct?
Yeah, Jim and I lived upstairs of the barn. It's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. We lived there for 6 years, and my husband, that was another turning point with the farm. Jim was on an ATV. They had flipped over a large ravine, and he's had 14 surgeries since then. So it's 18 steps to get up to that apartment. So that wasn't happening, and he had to quit work, retire about 10 years earlier than what we had planned. So at that time, and it was actually his income that fueled the farm. Until then, it was Jim and I and what we could put into the farm. And so Jim kindly said, "Lori, I hope you understand, but we have to sell the farm." And I was like, okay, how do you sell God's farm? I didn't even feel like it was ours, it was God's, So I just thought or prayed that somehow or other we'd make it sustainable. So when we had to move out of the barn, to One Level Living, we decided to rent that out as like a farm stay so people can come and stay for a weekend or a week or whatever they want. Don't even have to do farm work. You can come and just enjoy the peacefulness of the.
It's not a bed and breakfast, though.
I don't cook. I grow, but I don't cook.
Who are these fellows here?
Oh, we do have a U-Pick flower garden, and so they came during COVID. There were a lot of musicians that wanted to perform and would call and ask if they could just come and play at the farm. And so these guys came and played, and people can come and pick a bouquet, and that helps to support the farm.
Fed by Faith. What is Fed by Faith?
Okay. In 2020, I was very thankful to be able to go to the farm when we all were experiencing that same anxiety and saying, everyone cooped up in their house. And I felt blessed to be able to go to the farm, put my hands in the dirt and do something worthwhile. And then other people felt the same. We started having volunteers. That's really when the volunteers started coming, was in 2020. And I get so excited. It's like the farm angels are coming, because I realized we could do so much more. Well, also with that, one of the farm angels that came was a woman named Christy Palmer. And Christy looked around and realized that, one, we were struggling in more ways than one, and kind of saw that financially, too, the farm couldn't keep going unless we did something more than the barn apartment. And she said, you need to be a 501c3. I was like, oh, that sounds like hard work. Like the farming wasn't enough, but we did form a 501c3 and named it Fed by Faith.
Okay.
Yep.
Ready for some questions? Huh? We got a runner here with a microphone ready, so be ready. Well, what's next for By Faith Farm?
Whatever he wants.
You gonna buy another farm?
Oh, no, I hope not. I mean, there have been some things that have happened that I feel like God is expanding the community of people that are, I feel like By Faith Farm is not Lori and Jim or Lori and Christy. By Faith Farm is a community of people that come to that farm that help to grow the food or help in any way. We have people that are prayer partners, just prayer warriors praying for the farm. They are as much a part of By Faith Farm. We have some people who are donors, that they can't, maybe physically can't put their hands in the dirt, but they can help in those ways. But I do feel like that this community is growing and more people want to come onto the farm. So we have a little cabin on the farm where people can experience being pretty much off-grid and just come for a spiritual retreat. So that may be an avenue where the farm grows, where we're not just planting seeds of food, but we plant seeds of faith. And people can come also to grow in their own faith, So I see that as a possibility that God's leaning towards. Some things happened even with that, where we were gifted some wood. I was not wanting, what started the whole idea of a cabin or a campground is we wanted to have a Christian concert, and there was someone willing to come and perform for us. But we're in Metro, and there was a lot of, certain permits you had to get and all. And our councilman for the area said, Lori, you know what you need on that farm? He said, you need a campground. I was like, no, I don't. That sounds like a lot of work, But he said that if we had a campground, then you can have a concert or whatever, and that's part of the campground, and you don't even need the permitting. I thought, well, maybe I do. Anyway, I didn't do it very professionally. I went to the Board of Zoning Appeals with a little plan I got off of Pinterest, and somehow or other, we got approved for a campground. Well, I still don't really want a campground, but we're approved, And so in starting this first little cabin, I ended up, a couple of things happened. One, I had not done anything with it, and the permit was about to expire. So I started praying, Lord, if this is really, really what you want, you want this campground or cabin or whatever, give me a sign, help me out here. And a man called who'd been at the Board of Zoning Appeals, and he said, how's that campground? And I said, it's not. He said, why in the world not? You need to do that. I said, I don't even know where to start. And he said, I tell you what, if you call Metro Codes and ask them if we can build a cabin up on stilts, I'll come out and I'll dig the holes and get your foundation for you. And I was like, okay. But I don't know if you know about calling Metro Codes. You don't call Metro Codes. You go sit down there for days and maybe get an appointment. Well, I called to Metro Codes and I asked if I could ask someone a question about this permit I had for a cabin. Well, 5 minutes later, I got a call back from the local codes inspector for our area. And I said, would you look up this permit and tell me if we could build this cabin on stilts? He looks it up, he goes, yeah, no problem with that. And I was like, is it that easy? He goes, yeah, just build it and call me when you get your foundation. I called these two men who are not contractors, they own the company. They came out with post hole diggers, dug the 9 holes, hand stirred the concrete, poured the concrete in the rebar. And then on Monday, I called Metro Codes, got a hold of that guy. He came out that afternoon and checked. And every contractor I've told that story said, no, it couldn't happen like that. It doesn't, but it did. And so I felt more so like, okay, God wants this cabin. And then an even more amazing thing, I was for another project going to Walker Lumber to get a piece of wood. And the gentleman there that owns the business asked me to tell the story of the farm, and I did. And as I was leaving, I didn't say anything about campground or cabin. I'm leaving. I got to my car, and he said, Miss Birckhead, he said, we get lumber that's been returned, and we can't sell it, but we donate it. Would you have any reason for this lumber? And I said, as a matter of fact. So then we got all this lumber donated. So it was like God brought the people to dig the foundation, and then he equipped us with some lumber. So it was like, guess we're building a cabin. So yeah.
Question?
My question for you is, would you please say more about what the Lord was doing in your heart during those uncertain times where, like, when you didn't think you would be able to keep the farm, that you'd have to sell? How did you stay in a place of surrender and saying, Lord, I trust you regardless of the outcome, and stay at peace?
Yeah, I know. I feel like I'm in constant communication with him, I don't know, it feels like my best friend, like who I talk to more than anyone, And so I think through the years, he has taught me more and more through every trial, army worm or Jim's accident and everything else. There's many other things that happened, and I thought, okay, this is the end. But to just feel like I'll do your will. If you want me to keep on with this farm, I'll keep on with this farm. If you want me to do something else, Lord, that's where I'm at, And that way, it has given me a sense of peace that it doesn't matter if the corn crop fails. It doesn't matter, I'm just here to do the Lord's will, whatever that is. And if he wants me to branch off and manage a cabin, okay, I'll do that. Yeah, just praying. But the main thing for me is making sure it's his will and not mine, that I'm not putting anything into my head. So my sort of litmus test for that is if I don't want to do it and it's in my head, then probably it is the Lord, So yeah, just praying a lot. And I think my mom taught me that as a little girl. My mother was always in prayer, and anytime there was anything that happened, she'd say, pray about it. Just pray about it. And yeah, that's what I did.
How many acres would you say that you're growing crops in?
Not that many. It's a 97-acre farm, but what we have in crops is probably less than 3 acres. We have 2 high tunnels, a greenhouse, and maybe even just 2 acres of actual crops. But in that 2 acres, we went from just a few hundred, maybe a couple of thousand pounds that first year, and we're growing now 25,000 pounds.
How much have you given away over the years? Do you have a figure for that?
Yeah, I don't know how much counting this year, but up to this year it was like about 212,000 pounds, I think is what we're up to, and yeah. And
Did you have to buy a lot of farm equipment?
we have through the years, and then, thanks to Jim and his job during those years, we have a tractor. We don't have a lot of there's a lot of farm equipment we want to have. We haven't gotten there yet. We do a lot of things just by hand weeding, hand planting. Most things are by hand. But now we do have a tractor, and but we're gradually, and as time goes on, maybe there'll be more things we can, because I would love to see, we could grow exponentially. We have so much land that we could, if we can do 25,000 pounds on a couple of acres, if we just moved it to 10 acres, think what we could do, So I'm just, whatever he wants, we'll do it, yeah.
I was wondering if you and Jim were able to build a home on the farm itself. You may have said that. If you did, I missed it. Where you can be hands-on more and be right there with it.
Yeah. Well, we did that with the building out of the barn, and then ended up going off the farm. And we're kind of settled in Hendersonville, and it's only a 30-minute drive for me to go back and forth to the farm. So we live in Hendersonville, and yeah. Do you live in Hendersonville? Yeah. So.
Have we said where the farm is located yet?
Oh, the farm is in Joelton. Y'all come out to see us, 7721 Whites Creek Pike, and we'll start having the U-Pick Flower Garden. Will be open around the 1st of June, and that's real fun. We'll have a little live music every once in a while, and come out and enjoy that. And I tell people, when you come out to the U-Pick, bring a picnic, hang out and stay a while and enjoy the farm. There's a couple of ponds on the farm. One of them's a fishing pond. And you can just come and stay. Lots of hiking trails. You can help harvest if you want. Weed if you want. That would be wonderful.
There's a slide here where you can donate. ByFaithFarm.com. You can go to that website and find out all the information of how to give to your endeavor. Is that correct?
That would be wonderful. Yeah.
And you don't turn away any money?
Never, no. Especially not that we're 501c3. Yeah.
You mentioned in your notes that you gave me earlier, Lori's prayer for the audience. What is that about? Do you have a prayer for the audience?
No, my prayer for everybody is what I'd tell my kids. Just to always listen for that whisper of God's voice and listen to it rather than your own voice of fear, because it's usually fear that takes us from doing those things that he wants us to do, So just listen for his voice.
Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it. We got another question.
What crops do you grow and where do you get the plants? How does that process work?
I get seeds, and we start them in the greenhouse. So we start our own seeds, and right now I've put in about 200 tomato plants. I just put in about 400 pepper plants. I've put in direct seeded string beans and cucumbers. It's going to be on a trellis. I think that'll be real pretty. I thought that would be nice to walk through the trellis and be able to harvest. We'll have corn and different kinds of melons, all kinds of squash, onions, some beets and radishes, all those summer kind of things.
How do you control the deer? Do you have a problem with deer?
I do.
Shotgun?
Yeah, a little bit of that sometimes, but we put up a deer fence, and it has worked pretty well. Like around the flowers, they love those sunflowers, and so we just put step-in post, you know what I'm talking about, little white step-in post, and just a minor little string. And if you zigzag it, the deer can't sense how deep it is, and they'll feel that string and then back off. And that has done pretty well for our, what I call our Back to Eden garden. It's a no-till garden, that and the flower garden. They kind of stay out of there. Now, they didn't stay out of the sweet potatoes last year, and they totally mowed those down to the ground like in one night. And so then we asked our friend the hunter to come and do a little hunting.
Concerning By Faith Farm, you have said you don't have to have it all figured out to say yes to God. Even in doubt, even in detours, God is already working on the provision. We are not the providers, He is, and His plan is always more beautiful than our plan. And you mentioned 3 key scriptures that have been demonstrated in your life. Genesis 22:14. So Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide.
Gosh.
And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. In Ephesians 3:20, now to Him who is able to do immensely more than all we ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work within us. Thank you again for sharing your story. And we invite you to take time this week to share your story of amazing grace, and we'll see you next month on Stories of Amazing Grace. Thank you for coming by.